And now, the winner of the 2017 Newbery Medal for the most distinguished book for children is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. Published by Algonquin Young Readers, an imprint of Algonquin Books of Chapel Hill, a division of Workman Publishing, edited by Elise Howard, publisher and editor, Algonquin Young Readers. The Girl Who Drank the Moon, the first piece of high fantasy to win the Newbery since 1985, is at its core a family story, telling the tale of Zan, a centuries-old witch not nearly as evil as her reputation, Glurk, an amorphous swamp monster of colossal wisdom, Firion, a pint-sized dragon with a dragon-sized heart, and Luna, their little girl, accidentally enmagicked, and their everything. But it is about so much more, too, about blind obedience and ultimate sacrifice, about swallowing your sorrow and claiming your power. It's incredibly ambitious, with 2 or 3 more narrative threads than ought to be humanly manageable, but hers is a feat of genius, and this is a sweeping, thrumming, heart-filling masterpiece. Kelly, on behalf of the 2017 Newbery Medal Selection Committee, it is my great honor to acknowledge your distinguished achievement and present to you the John Newbery Medal for The Girl Who Drank the Moon.
Oh, good, there are tissues here. I was worried. Give me a sec. Okay, I'm good. I can do this. Hi, guys. I only just learned today that it's a real medal. Nobody tells me anything. So, hi, everyone. Are you having a nice time? I hope so. All right, so, nobody writes a book alone. This may come as a shock to some of you, those of you who aren't writers. I mean, we look like we're alone, don't we? In our tea-stained, ripped jeans and the sun-starved dullness of our faces when it's clear that we haven't left our offices in days. I mean, I've heard. But seriously, we can't do this by ourselves, which means before I can talk about all this business, I need to say thank you to some people. First of all, I wouldn't be here at all if it weren't for Lindsay Davis, who I just met today and then I promptly burst into tears, who's not only the first person who said yes, but the first person who championed my very first book. That first yes in a writer's life means all the difference in the world, and it still does. It still does forever. And speaking of first yeses, I also would be remiss if I didn't also thank the effervescently beautiful Nancy Conescu and the whole team at my very first publisher, Little Brown, who brought my first book into the world and supported the steps that led me here. And so thank you. I really appreciate you guys. Also, clearly, I need to thank Stephen Malk, my amazing agent, who hoisted my career on his back and has carried it tirelessly across deserts and dark forests and high mountains and perhaps even into outer space. I'm not entirely sure about that last bit, but I wouldn't put it past him. My writing is better because of Steve, mostly because I'm constantly trying to impress him. I sure as heck wouldn't be here without Elise Howard, who, if you don't know this already, is a wacky super genius and literally writes about everything, including, by the way, when she literally ordered me to write this very book. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Always listen to Elise. And helping Elise is the entire team at Algonquin Young Readers. The boundlessly joyful Trevor Ingerson, Eileen Lawrence, Sarah Albert, Brooke Chuka, and many others. So many of you who are all buoyed up by the support by the support from Workman Publishing. Dan Reynolds, I gotta say, you are steering a hell of a ship. Thank you. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for my writing group, The Black Sheep, Steve Bresnoff, Curtis Scaletta, Carlin Coleman, Jody Cromie, Brian Bliss, and Christopher Lincoln, who refused to allow me to give up on this book or any of my books and insisted that I continue, even emailing the manuscript that I thought that I had erased back to me over and over and over again, saying, "Hey, dummy, don't you know how email works?" Even though sometimes it does seem impossible. I have to give honor to my legion of ladies, that beautiful battalion of women authors who have stood next to me and supported me in the way that women have supported women since the dawn of the dang universe. We bind wounds, we prop up, we soothe, we give advice, we hand one another the tools that we might need to solve our particular problems. Hammers, for example, nails, compasses, sailing ships, armor, shield, and perhaps a very, very sharp knife. Specifically, and this is a small list within a broad community, Anne Ursu, Tracy Batiste, Oleg Bemisola, Rude Perkovich, Laura Ruby, Laurel Snyder, Kate Messner, and Linda Urban. Where would I be without you ladies? And I thank my lucky stars to have you in my life. I also have to express my profound gratitude to the Newbery Committee. You guys. So first of all, I don't know if you guys know this, but they love each other so much. And their care for one another is almost matched with their care for this work. I thank you for your intelligence and care and honor for this art form, how you demonstrate through your tireless effort the fact that all of this matters. Clearly, because we're all here. This is a lot of people. All of this matters. This work matters, each reader matters, each book that you pored over matters. I see it and I appreciate it. And gosh, I love you guys just as much. You guys are amazing. Thank you. I am proud to be laboring in this field with you. So I salute you. And lastly, I can't look at them right now. I would not be here without my family. Sorry, just give me a sec. My parents, who helped teach me how to understand stories, to see them from the inside and look out. My husband, who bears the singularly difficult position of being the long-suffering spouse to an only mostly sane writer, and who does so with grace and strength and dedication and kindness. And this is difficult because I'm a bit of a handful. Pretty sure. And to my 3 kids, who are in the process of writing their own lives, and also in the process of rewriting the whole world. I wouldn't have become a writer without you. This is true. They're like, see? This is true. I certainly would not become this writer without you. You kids are my first thought and my last thought with every story. None of this would exist without you, my darlings. Thank you. Oh, there's more. Oh, there's more. Phew. So, apparently, I won a Newbery. I'm still astonished by it. I'm still, after all these months in this state of non-belief, it's a story, you see. one that stands in conflict with the narrative that I have created for myself, the narrative that helps me to organize my life and what I believe about my life. In the weeks that followed, that phone call at 5 in the morning, when I was ripped out of the deepest of deep sleeps by the voices of a room full of marvelously cheerful librarians, with their impossibly good news, and me responding with garbly nonsense, punctuated by the occasional, "How is this possible?" I'm still trying to accept the fact that it did, in fact, occur and was not simply a thing that I made up. This is harder than you'd think. I literally make things up for a living. This is not due to any particular ambivalence about my book. In truth, I loved writing this book. I really did. I loved mucking about in its strangeness, its poetry and paper birds and monsters and odd magics. I loved writing through its pain and confusion and grief and hard-fought joy. I loved weaving in those not so subtle at all super feminist undertones, because that stuff never gets old. So yeah, I had a pretty good time with this one. Still, I held this deep and fundamental belief that no one else on earth was going to like it. This is true. I thought that I was writing a book for an audience of one, that one being myself, and that I couldn't imagine the relationship that I had with this book that was so deeply personal and deeply intimate that that could be replicated with another reader. And in fact, I turned it in to my poor editor with a letter of apology. This assumption was part of the narrative that I lived in, part of the story that I insisted on telling myself, which meant that each time that a reviewer didn't hate it, or each time it inexplicably landed on a list or whatever, each time was an astonishment to me. This award, this speech, me standing here in front of the best-looking book nerds in America? Well, it's not what I expected. And I feel as though I'm living in a story that isn't mine, a narrative that I did not invent, and one that I hesitate to claim as my own. I've been telling stories my whole life, most of them outlandish, most of them outrageous, most of them strange and odd and misshapen. I can't help it. I blame wiring. I blame anxiety. I blame the fact that I was an oldest child, and oldest children are typically sent out of doors with unruly younger children to entertain them, I guess. And honestly, what else are you supposed to do? I told stories. I took a small space and a small world and a small life, and I enlarged it, embiggened it, enmagicked everything. I used stories to tell the truth about the world and about myself, and I used stories to tell lies about the world and about myself. For example, once upon a time, when I was a mousy-haired, accident-prone, socially anxious, and unbearably lonely 12-year-old with an epic Oz/fairy tales/Anne of Green Gables obsession, I journeyed with my 3 elvish companions on a magical path into a deep, dark wood. Actually, it wasn't a deep, dark wood at all. It was the scrubby leftovers of my city's once great trolley line, abandoned sometime in the 50s, and which had gradually succumbed to the will of weeds and buckthorn scrub and cottonwood trees. To me, it was a wild and endless space. And my Elvish companions, the blonde children down the block that I babysat every Tuesday and Thursday, believed me when I told them it was special, and they believed me when I told them it was magic, and they believed me when I told them it went on for miles and miles and miles and miles, and we had to hold hands very tightly, otherwise we might be lost forever in the thick canopy of trees. They believed me, of course, because I wanted to believe myself. We believe a thing, and it is. That is the power of stories. I told them if they stared at tree bark for long enough, they'd eventually see a map. They'd eventually see a map. Oh, dang! Oh, I thought I got it, rats. Well, whatever. That would give them perfect directions in a certain country that does not exist on Earth. I told them that pink quartz is the buried remains of a dead gnome's heart, and that you can distract ghosts by blowing ashes in their faces. And that a sudden cool breeze was the collected spirits of dead warriors trying to remind us to be brave and bold and kind and righteous. I never knew if their mother was bothered by the endless stream of drivel that I poured into those tender ears, although, to be fair, she did stop calling me, so maybe. Stories enlarge. They expand, they amplify, they turn sows' ears into silk purses and pig keepers into kings. A story can make a lonely, anxious kid feel more than herself for just a moment, and can make an ugly, forgotten gap in a city feel like a broad, wild, and infinite space. We tell stories because we yearn for larger truths, larger experiences, larger worlds, and larger selves. We tell stories because we wish to contain multitudes, and then we do. We see the world through a wider and more complicated lens, and we can, for a little while, feel as another feels, think as another thinks, and breathe someone else's precious and magical breath. But there is another power of stories, one that well-meaning and bookish people don't always like to talk about. Stories can reveal, analyze, and dissect, yes, but they can also conceal, obfuscate, and distract. Stories break down barriers and reveal the nobility in ordinary people and things, but they can also turn nice old ladies into fearsome witches and neighbors into fiends. Stories create empathy, kindness, connection, and antipathy, hatred, and division. Stories are bridges and walls. Stories are bridges and walls. So what do we do about that? When I was writing this speech, I got asked a lot about politics. Are you going to talk about politics in your Newbery speech, Kelly Barnhill? This is what people asked me after they were able to convince me that, yes, I did actually win a damn Newbery and I didn't make it up. Look, despite its veneer of witches and dragons, it's a political book. It is. Of course it is. And for those of you who didn't notice its politics, surprise. And I'll tell you, it's hard not to talk about politics. We are living, I don't know if you've noticed, in interesting times. And yes, all art is political. Yes, it is. And all politics, in essence, is storytelling. All social movements, all social change, all arcs of justice, they are all storytelling. We take the narrative we are given and we retell that story in a way that better reflects the world we want to see. Okay? Human beings build meaning through narrative. We can't help it. We're wired that way. So whose stories are told and whose are silenced, and why those stories are told in the first place, and what we as a culture do with those stories, this matters. It's always matters. This work has always mattered. But it does sound now more than ever, and we all have to pay attention. And as people who traffic in books and stories for a living, like literally everybody here, we need to show kids how to pay attention too. I wrote this book intending to wrestle with the notion of false narratives, the stories that turn neighbors into scapegoats, the stories that perpetuate intolerance, the stories that encourage us to notice the splinter in our neighbor's eye while ignoring the 2x4 in our own. We have all seen how minds can be opened through stories, but we have also read our history, and we know the other side of that coin. We know that systemic oppression is rationalized through stories. We know that atrocities are justified through stories. We know that tyranny and intolerance are built on stories. And that's on the macro scale. On the micro scale, we see the same thing. Self-hatred is a narrative. Self-doubt is narrative. Heck, even anxiety is a narrative, is a story that we tell ourselves again and again and again and again, and we can't turn off. Stories are powerful, for good or bad. They can literally rewrite a person's sense of themselves, and they can rewrite the world around us. This is what I was trying to do in The Girl Who Drank the Moon, to show how a story, when it is cynically told, can twist the truth. I wanted to show how a cynical story could become a wall, a prison, a weapon. And I wanted also to show how to subvert that narrative, how to reimagine and replace the stories that harm with the stories that enlarge, ennoble, and expand. And this is the role, of course, of the book. Back when I used to teach, I often told my students that a book and a story were two separate entities. A book, of course, is not a story per se, but rather it contains the tools and raw materials with we, as readers, construct stories. With books, we are both inside and outside. We are both participants and builders. With books, we have the tools not only to build the stories within its pages, but to rethink and rebuild the narratives that we have accepted as true, but maybe aren't. And then we can make something new. I believe this is possible. I've seen it happen, and I know you've seen it too. We live in interesting times, and we have kids who right now are deeply in need of books that will give them the tools that they need to think critically, to ask questions, to break down assumed narratives both about themselves and about the world. So yeah, we need books that are mirrors so that any kid can see themselves clearly. We need books that are bright lamps that shine light and hope into a dark and troubled world. We need books that are bridges and roads connecting that which we know to that which we do not. We need books that are safe harbors and welcoming sanctuaries. Books that are armor and shield, friend and companion. Books that free prisoners, heal the harmed, teach the ignorant, and feed our aching souls. Once upon a time, I was a lonely kid, an anxious kid, burdened with a false narrative, a story about myself that I told myself. It took me a long time to learn how to subvert that narrative. As book people, and I'm looking at all of you, we are all experts in subversion. Yeah, we know that books teach us to transgress, to stand up, to listen, to connect, to analyze, and to understand. I've often said that reading is an act of radical empathy, and I do believe it, but the shortened version of that statement is also true. Reading is radical. Full stop. So this is why every kid deserves a library. Well, first of all, the shortened version of that sentence is also true. Every kid deserves a library. Come on. Especially here in Chicago. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So why every kid deserves a library stacked to the rafters with radical reads, books that enlarge and ennoble us, books that remind us to be brave and bold and kind and righteous, books that challenge us to face the narratives in our culture, the narratives that twist, that divide, that tell us lies about ourselves, and to break them down, look inside, analyze their working parts, and ultimately write something new. Tell a new story, rewrite the world. Thank you.